It's January 17th, 2024, and you know why you're here, so let's kick this off right and introduce the players. Hello, everyone. I'm TreesapJake, and I will not accidentally remove the audio from the VOD this time.
You better not, because I'm Bigmoran, and I'm trying to beat the washed allegations. Garrison isn't here today. He's off fighting some demons, his own demons. But anyway, how's it going, Jake? What have you been up to since our last show?
Oh, well, I've been up to quite a bit, I think. It's hard to condense into, I think, 2 hours, but to give you kind of a short summary, I've been pulling my hair out at solo shuffle repeatedly. I think that's kind of the best way to summarize it. I've really kind of gone in and tried my best to kind of spread myself across the kind of classes that I'm playing. I've been playing a lot of Demo Lock. I've been playing a lot of my Death Knight. Both I think are really fun to play. Maybe less so Demo Lock when you're queuing into a lot of melee, but I've really enjoyed both of them, especially in like twos and threes. And then I've also picked up the Devastation Evoker as well. Kind of dipped my
Ooh.
toes in there, and happy to say that I had 100% win rate in my first two shuffles, classic 6-0 in both, going from 1600 MMR to 2-1 MMR in like the space of two shuffles. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, what about yourself?
Yeah, actually, so I played some solo shuffle last night. I not to flex too hard, but I got the 2400 elite
Ooh.
finally this season. Um, it- Admittedly, I was like four beers, uh, 4 beers into that queue session. Like it went pretty well actually, all things considered. It's kind of funny. There's an ironic thing when you play Druid. I swear to God, it's one of those classes you can just play slightly better if you're just a little bit tipsy, not too drunk, but
Yeah,
if you're just a bit tipsy, you're gonna land some more cyclones. You get more feisty with that cyclone button if you have no fear.
exactly. And I feel like that's
But
what you need. You
you
need to do that.
yeah, because your heals are strong anyway. You're not doing much. Like that's the thing with Druid right now. Obviously, it's arguably the best healer, and the healing output is so insane that you have all this free time. It's like you might as well just try to win the game with clones. So I did that, and I got 2400. That was really fun. Also, been playing a little bit of Resto Shaman. I have fun playing Shaman, but yeah, it's not as you have to do a lot to play shaman. Like you're not just the healer, you're just kind of doing all these crazy things at all times, interrupting, grounding. I mean, you know how it is, right? You kind of have to fill
Yeah.
you have to spread out, your globals with every part of your toolkit, which is kind of interesting. Haven't really been playing any DPS this season. I had the urge to randomly play Holy Paladin for the first time in my life yesterday. I don't know why. So I might boost a Paladin in the next few weeks and try that, especially now since Conquest is uncapped. But and also, by the way, I know we normally ask this question: did you get anything good in your vaults? My vaults have been absolutely terrible for the past few
Well,
weeks. I've been getting
I,
gems.
I'm going to disappoint you because on my demo lock, I have been choosing to go for some of the PvE items that I've got, and the reason why I've decided to go down the dark path is because I wanted to get Keystone Master and
Oh
get that
yeah.
2K rating, and I did. So I got that mount. I'm just happy that I got one of them. It was very easy to do. If I was going to base getting the mount off in PvE versus actually trying to do it in PvP, I'd say the PvE one is incredibly easy, and getting 20s in pretty much every single key is yeah, just a walk in the park, really, in
Yeah,
comparison.
it's funny. A lot of PvPers have gone to Mythic Plus this season, and yeah, I mean, right? It's an infinitely scaling system, and from my understanding, it starts to get a bit sweaty. Once you get to the 24, 25, 26 key level,
Mm.
and then above that is just pretty darn sweaty. But yeah, it's definitely fun. I've been obviously making some Mythic Plus content. Haven't really been doing much myself, but it's an interesting game mode, and you know, if you want the mount, it sounds like it's pretty accessible if you're a pretty good PvPer. So that's good
Yeah,
news. But no,
absolutely. I think they've done a good job with Mythic Plus. I think that's probably why people gravitate to it, is because they're able to actually go, you know what? Actually, this game mode is nice and balanced and has a lot to offer and is fun when you do it with friends. I think that's the thing, that sort of the modern WoW player has built up a lot of friends, and they're actually able to kind of get into Mythic Plus and go, let's just blast some keys on a Friday night with drinking beers and stuff like that. If I try to do that doing 3v3, I think by the end of the night, either we'd be shouting at one another because we're just drunk, and
Yeah.
every little annoying thing is going to annoy you. And then number two, your performance goes massively downhill because your reaction speeds are just so dog. It's going to be rough. So I feel like there's a kind of more casual side to Mythic Plus, which is kind of more chill and relaxed and actually just fun. Whereas I think that, we've been stressing about PvP, so people have been going, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to not stress anymore. Just get a quick win in the M plus and then just saunter back and do a solo shuffle or something.
And the best part is you don't lose rating.
Yeah,
What a genius system.
I know.
Of course people like to play. You don't feel the losses. When you play PvP, like you before the show started, Jake was saying, he had an unlucky series of lobbies. This is a feeling that we can all relate to. It's like you lose in PvP and it feels extra bad, right? And
Yeah,
solo
for real.
shuffle especially, it's like, you lose and that means now you have to win two lobbies in a row. You have to get two winning lobbies because you can't just 3-3, right? That doesn't do anything. Sometimes going 3-3 is actually bad, right?
Yeah, legit.
So, yeah, I don't know. I definitely think, maybe this is a completely different this is a random tangent, but maybe we do need to rethink about PvP, how the rewards are structured and rating loss, and maybe there is something to learn from Mythic Plus because, yeah, and it seems like the fact that you don't lose makes it a more repeatable system somehow, or makes you more likely to participate. So maybe that's something that Blizzard might consider in the future. I mean, geez, I think the whole rating system in WoW does need some major overhaul. Don't know what that would look like,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's probably another episode, right? That's a
All
whole
right.
other conversation.
I think we could do. I think we could talk about that for ages. However, I feel as if uh, it's going to be. Oh, you know what? We should actually talk. We should actually have an actual dedicated episode to talking about a change in the rating system. And I think, as you say, it's very archaic in the way that it's run. But
Yeah,
it's very truthful that when you queue in for a solo shuffle and you go on a losing streak, it is horrible. And I think the worst part about it is I find myself kind of going, oh my god, my teammates suck. Like, what are they doing? Like, why have they done that? Why are they doing this? I especially get frustrated on Warlock because it's so easy to kind of for Warlocks to kite, and all they got to do is stand a certain place and have a bit of like decent positioning, and then you're golden. You can never die. No one
yeah,
seems to do that in Shuffle. So it's equally
yeah,
frustrating. And you just sat there going like, is this my fault? Am I bad? And you just don't know because you don't know if you're bad. Like when you play threes, you know if you do something stupid, right? You know when you've made a mistake. And like, okay, yeah, you know what, guys, fair enough. Hold my hands up. I didn't wall soon enough. I didn't do this soon enough. I could have ported here. I could have waited until you in CC. I was a little bit too trigger happy. But in Shuffle, you just don't know because it's kind of like it sort of seems, because of how dampening works in Shuffle, it just seems to kind of just collapse on you so quickly. You're kind of on a time limit.
yeah. And it's hard to really see what your partners are doing. You don't really know. I mean, you can, right? You kind of know what they're doing, and you kind of know what they might be thinking, but you don't know for sure, right? It's unlike
Yeah.
threes where you're constantly communicating. So it can be a bit frustrating, right, to have these games where you lose and it feels like, wait, why did I lose that? I thought that was going so well.
Mm.
That's, yeah, it's a lot of structural issues there. But yeah, I think that's a conversation that we could have an entire episode about, which I think we should do in the future. How would we restructure um, the rating system in WoW? And maybe that's a good
Yes.
question for the audience. Audience, if you're listening, tell us what you would do to restructure rewards and rating in WoW PvP, because I think that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, especially if you're at home and you listen to this like on a commute, or just when you're chilling, or whilst you're leveling, or whilst you're waiting for solo shuffle. Just tweet us at technically_PvP and let us know what you think and whether or not you have a cool idea, because if it's cool enough, we'll 100% retweet it or re-exit. I don't know, I can't remember what it's called now, but
Whatever.
whatever it is, whatever the cool kids say, we'll do it. So but I think that kind of nice little topic there kind of links us into the kind of need greed pass, which I think, well, you came up with this time, Big, and it sounded really cool. So I'm going to try and play the bumper now, if it will allow me, and we will see what happens.
This likely won't be a clean fight, so keep your distance, eh?
I think that worked. Okay, need greed pass. Do you wanna give us the lowdown, Big?
Yeah, so the tournament season is coming up, and whether or not you're participating or not, you can definitely answer this next need greed pass. So I want to base this question off the current meta, so not necessarily the historic meta, but the meta we're experiencing right now. And I want you to imagine that you're making a team, and you need to invite, obviously up to four. Or I'm sorry, including yourself. You're gonna invite 4 people to your roster. So you have a list of classes you can choose from. I want you to need one of those classes, and I want you to greed one of those classes. So not necessarily spec, just the class as a whole. And then we're gonna pass on basically the rest. So if you had to make a team, a tournament team for this AWC season, which are the classes that you'd be needing, and which are the classes that you'd be greeting? I'll let you go first, Jake. I'm curious here what your answer is gonna be.
Yeah. This is going to be an interesting one. We were kind of sort of talking about it a little bit just before the show started, and I think we kind of hinted upon some of the ideas that I had. Now, I think I'm going to be incredibly biased, and by biased I mean go for stuff that's OP. I think personally that the outlier in all of the specs, if I was to compete with something, so I'm picking 3, right, including myself.
You're picking 2. You maybe we can need 1 and then greed 2. How about that? We need
Okay.
1 and then greed 2.
Okay. Because that'll be my
That'll
four
be your
teammates.
roster. Yeah.
Okay. So if we assume that I'm going to be playing Warlock / DK, we'll just say that's what I'm playing. That will be mine, or just stick with Warlock. I'm gonna pick what I think is the most OP class at the minute that works well with mine. I'm gonna go with Rogue. I think that's obvious. I have a feeling that we both probably would pick Rogue.
Mm-hmm.
I think it doesn't matter which spec it is. I think personally maybe something like Outlaw with Demo would be really cool. But I think I'd probably want to play Destruction for the AWC because I think Destruction is really good. Destruction, either sub or Asa or Outlaw, I think all of them will work really well. And depending on what you're kind of facing, you could change that. So I would pick a Rogue as a need. So I'm going to need Rogue. Has to be Rogue. I think in order to be competitive, there's going to need to be a Rogue. And then I would greed Resto Druid because Resto Druid healing is insane and Resto Druid at CC is insane. I think they've got a lot to offer and they're really good for drinking, for making sure that they get the drinks in. And then the fourth, the other one I will greed as well. Now this is going to be the difficult one because at the minute I've got an insane comp. Let me think. I think I would pick Monk. I think I'd go Monk. I think I'd pick Windwalker in this instance. And that would be my other greed because I feel like you could get some insane stuff where Rogue is peeling the entire team and the Windwalker just one-shots you in 3 seconds as well. Should the Destro Rogue fail, you can get Destro Windwalker or something along those lines. I think that'd be really good.
Yeah, I think it's always good in a tournament to have like this this sort of comp that you can execution test people with. We saw a glimpse of that. There was one BlizzCon, I think it was in Legion, where some team ran, I think it was Sub Rogue Enhancement Shaman. I think it was Seedu's team that played it. I don't remember. But they had this like crazy just one trick comp that they kind of had up their sleeve. That was like, okay, we're just gonna catch the enemy team off guard with this one comp, and that they only played it once, and they just got their one win, and they're like, okay, then we're gonna put this away now. So I could see that with like the Windwalker Rogue. You know, you win one game with that comp, and you you kind of have it as a threat because it's one of those comps where if you're a healer on the enemy team, if you make one mistake, like you could easily get punished. So This is a challenging question, I think. I think for me, personally, as a Resto Druid main, I'm actually going to need on a mage. Because I think Druid Mage synergy is always really strong. It's pretty reliable. And I think in a lot of in a tournament setting, you kind of want to slow the game down as often as you can. And I think you can do that pretty easily with a mage. It's kind of the ultimate, the mages don't like to admit this, but mages are the ultimate dampeners. They can just dictate the pace of the game. So I'd want a mage probably the most. Now, there's 3 things I want to greed, and I don't know which ones I'm going to want to greed the most. So let me just tell you what those 3 things are. I want to greed a warlock, I want to greed a rogue, and I want to greed a warrior. And I don't know which one of those things I want to leave out. I think I want to keep the rogue the most. But I think if I were to take a tournament very seriously, it'd be really nice to have a warrior on your team, because I think that gives you some defensive flexibility that you don't necessarily get with rogue. But I think if I have to choose between warrior and rogue, I'm going to choose rogue for sure. And yeah, we all know it's probably one of the best classes for tournaments, arguably the best class for a tournament. And then I think just having a warlock on your team is really good in tournament too. So if I had a warlock, a rogue, and a mage, that gives me mage lock, gives me rogue lock, it gives me rogue mage. And I think that's probably the strongest 3 comps I could have personally for the way I like to play the game. And I think they're pretty consistent comps in tournaments.
Yeah.
So
I think that's cool.
Honorable mention to warrior, though. I almost want to pick warrior, but I can't really justify it. It's out of the budget a little bit. We hope that the rogue can ult a warrior, like many of the rogues tend to do.
Yeah, but Big, you can't say that warriors are OP, because if you do, you're gonna get attacked.
They're gonna come out of the woods with an axe and chase me down.
They're gonna whirlwind you to death and say, "How dare you even mention that we're OP?" There is no such thing as warriors being OP. They are underperforming and need buffs immediately.
At all times, yes.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really interesting one. I was, as you mentioned, Warlock. I was about to go, "Oh, Big, is this our AWC sign up? Is this happening? Are we finally doing our EU-NA crossover?" And then you were like, "Maybe between Rogue and Warrior." And I was like, "Oh,
yeah." Oh. I mean, I love playing with warlocks as a Resto Druid. I've always loved playing with warlocks, just in general as a healer. They're very easy to heal if they kind of know what they're doing. Right, it's one of those specs where you have that synergy with your healer when you play with a warlock. You're not really playing with your DPS, you're playing more with your healer. And so I've always kind of gravitated towards warlock players for that reason. Obviously, it's kind of annoying that clone and fear share DR, but it's probably a good thing they do, because that would be broken if they didn't. So yeah, and I'm sure all the classes we needed and graded on are going to be pretty well represented in the next few weeks throughout the AWC season. And yeah, so yeah, if you're listening at home, just kind of tell us, you can, or if you're watching the stream right now, I saw someone say they need rogue and greed mage and DH. I think those are 3 excellent picks. But yeah, let us know what you would need and what you would greed if you wanted to make your own tournament team.
Absolutely. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think actually Devastation Evokers are going to be a bit of a wild card going into the AWC. I think we are going to be shocked. I think someone's going to bring out. I think there's people that are going to randomly bring out the Devastation Evoker, and we're going to be surprised at the fact that actually it pumps. And I think in combination with something that has even just the slightest amount of MS effect, you're going to be in serious trouble with someone who at least knows how to play it very well. Because I feel like with any kind of evoker, you can be good at it, but it requires time to master it, for sure.
Yeah,
I think that's what's very interesting about the class and also the specs. I mean, I'm a big hater of augmentation. Really don't think, I kind of want to put that in the side. I'm kind of glad that it does nothing at the minute. But
Yeah.
I'm really happy to see Devastation Evoker kind of coming back in, even though they are like massively overtuned, especially on Disintegrate. But it does feel like they are competitive, and that's nice. I think it's really nice. I actually saw a tweet today talking about the comparisons between kind of MOP and this season, and I think I can kind of see it. I think it's a slightly different variation of it though. There is high damage, and I think high damage is good, as we know. It's all very good. I think some classes are a bit more bursty than others, which is not necessarily fair. Like some people feel like they're always bursting, but I think the difference is nowadays is that despite not having the length of CC that we had back in Mob, where a lot of people have a lot more interrupts and kind of micro CCs, which in my opinion, makes it far more annoying. Like I'd much rather be kind of like working to stop the massive crowd control kind of circle than kind of perpetually feel like, oh, I can just about get there, and then suddenly, oh no, actually no, I've stopped it. I've been stopped by this 2-second shockwave that is protecting the warrior from using his kick or whatever. It's incredibly annoying, and I find like I would much rather be trying to stop longer CC than this micro CC sort of situation. So but
Right.
I think we've got like I think it's a really good season so far, but I'm really interested to see, going back to my main point, if we get some Devastation Evokers in.
Yeah, I mean, I think last season I believe Chun-Li played Devastation Evoker with Cubsy in some of the AWC games. They kind of had a weird style of playing like that. It was kind of slow, more dampening based. They kind of out maneuvered their opponents and sort of won by spacing and sort of these big burst windows. Didn't really do much in between. But Devastation is, as I said earlier, it's kind of nice to have a spec on your team that can really execution test healers. And I think Devastation is obviously one of those. Like, you can easily die in the opener to a Devastation Evoker. Oh my gosh, that happens so many times in Solo Shuffle. My bane in Solo Shuffle are lobbies where you have an Unholy DK and a Devastation Evoker, and you have to deal with that opener, that grip,
Yeah.
blind, his Evoker stun, strangulate. Like, oh my gosh, that is the most difficult situation to deal with as a healer. And so if you can execution test people like that in tournament where they're already kind of nervous, oh my gosh, I'm sure you could get some free wins like that.
Have you tried the triple Evoker Dream?
No, I did. I saw Venruki made a video about that. I was playing it on stream, but didn't get to see it myself.
I can't remember what they called it. I kind of want to call it the Dragosi Cleave, but
Oh my gosh,
that's kind of what I want to call it.
Are we allowed to say that?
I don't know. If we're not allowed to say this, Gareth, you can edit this one out.
Okay.
But we'll. That's kind of. I think they came up with a name for it, which was actually kind of similar to that one, I think. But I played it, and I played it the other day, and it's just so stupid because the amount of damage you do when you kind of like triple DR, sort of deep breath them. Oh my god, it's nutty actually. But actually, I think more importantly, more than that in general, I think they've kind of just given them the updates that they needed, like the changes to how Saw works. Means that you can kind of go out into the world and kind of feel like I actually am playing a dragon instead of this sort of stupid little thing that kind of can't fly itself, and I have to jump on another dragon in order to fly somewhere. That was always really stupid to me. But
they should give you a glyph that allows you to play in the human form.
yes,
because
oh my god,
that's my problem with the spec. Is it just looks so stupid. You're the dragon. Like, you just look silly running around. The run animation just looks ridiculous. But yeah, if they could just allow you to play in human form, I think I'd probably be more inclined to play Evoker for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, I mean, like, you know what, they after Dragonflight they should give them an ability, like going into the War Within, you should be able to get the ability to do something along those lines, because the aspects have been returned to their glory, and they're able to choose between human and non-human. So why not, like, kind of just give the people what they want. But
Exactly.
anyways, I feel like before we get stuck into any more discussion, we should talk about the upcoming WoW PvP events. And I'm going to try and get this one to work now. Give me 1 second.
Get in there and fight! Stop hiding!
There we go. I'm actually on a roll today. I've actually got everything working. Hopefully the VOD is going to save. Gerasar isn't going to get angry at me. He won't be throwing his Tim Hortons at me, that's for sure. No donuts will be spilt. But anyway, let's talk about the upcoming WoW PvP events. I think on here we've said that Big Donny Cow is going to delay his 1v1 dueling tournament to the 19th of Jan. It was meant to happen tonight. But actually it has been permanently postponed until we can get, annoyingly, until we can get some more people to get involved. So if you are interested in 1v1 dueling tournaments and you want to earn a little bit of quick gold by beating everyone else out, then message Big Donny Cow. He's on Twitter, so have a little chat with him. Also happening tonight is the Oasis Community Mythic Plus Key Push Tournament. So that's the 19th of Jan. That's happening tonight. In more kind of sort of baseline Blizzard sort of events coming up, here is actually all of the cups. So the AWC Cup number 1 is happening the 31st of Jan, which I believe is midweek. Yeah, it's Wednesday.
Yeah.
Midweek.
Yeah, I think the qualification round usually happens in the middle of the week, and then the tournament games I believe they start on Saturday.
Yeah, I imagine it would have started on, so it'd be like the 31st and then kind of starting on the 3rd of Feb on that Saturday and then playing on Sunday as well.
Can't really have a desk job while playing WoW. Like if you want to play in a tournament, you have to take off a Wednesday, excuse me, boss, I have to take off this Wednesday to play in a World of Warcraft tournament. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, legit. You know what's so funny though? Actually, I remember doing that in one of the tournaments that they did. I can't remember if it was a Diablos tournament or not, but I played one with my mates in BFA, but I could only do it because I was on furlough. It's like
nice.
There's absolutely zero way I could have done that tournament other than if I didn't have a job at the time. Like, it's crazy. So yeah, you've got to really be dedicated to it. I mean, one assumes that if you're going to the AWC, that your kind of main focus is to be competitive in the esports, and either you're a streamer, I mean, you're streaming full time, or competing is a source of income. So as little as that may be, I feel like that's the kind of vibe that we're going for. Anyway, Second Cup is the next following week on the 7th of Feb. So obviously that would be going on. You'd be able to watch it from the 10th of Feb. Then you've got the MDI Group A on the 16th of Feb, MDI Group B on the 23rd of Feb, AWC Gauntlet and Mid-Season Clash on the 1st of March. Then you've got the MDI Time Trials between the 31st of Jan to the 5th of Feb, and then the MDI Global Finals on the 8th of March. What's this? 3 seasons of esports with AWC Crossing Season 3 and 4 of Dragonflight, and MDI in Season... oh my God. And the Great Push in Season 4. Okay, basically everything's all happening kind of in Season 3 and Season 4. And I think there's probably was another season happening during Season 1 of the War Within. That's a lot of notes there, trying to make kind of sense of everything. I imagine there's just a lot going on in the next couple of weeks to the month as we lead on to the War Within, and obviously Kata Classic coming out at some point soon as well. I imagine that would be good timing for the downtime.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, I mean, do you follow the MDI or TGP at all? And if you do, like, which one is your favorite tournament? Because I think I mean, they're obviously both different. I think the MDI is a bit more interesting because it's typically off meta stuff. You just run the dungeon as fast as possible doing massive pulls. TGP is like TGP is basically whatever the current meta is, and they just push the highest key, which is what people are doing on ladder. MDI is like, okay, we need to beat this dungeon as quickly as we can, so let's bring in some unholy DKs. I just think the MDI is way more interesting. I'm just curious what you think.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I won't lie, I don't watch much PvE apart from the Race to World First, so I definitely watch the kind of like the new tiers when they come out and doing those. But I have watched some of the MDI, and I definitely think I prefer the MDI. I mean, I wouldn't know much of the difference between the two of them. To be fair, you telling me that's the major difference between the Great Push and MDI is the first time I've really actually ever thought about it. So in that aspect, I'd probably lean towards the MDI because I like the concept of there being a time trials versus another team and how quickly you do it versus another team. I like that competitive nature. I think that is the only time you could ever lose in M plus. So I think that's a really interesting way I've always thought that was a really interesting way of doing it, and I do love the fact that they do the MDI. I wish there was more hype behind it. I feel like there's a lot more hype maybe with the AWC, and like because it's an institution. The idea of the concept of the tournaments that we do in BlizzCon, etc. That's there's kind of that's a sort of institution, and we haven't had the MDI for a very long time. But to be honest with you, I think about Mythic Plus quite a bit, and I think how innovative it is that when Blizzard came up with that off the back of challenge modes from
Oh
MOP
yeah.
and the kind of stuff like coming into Legion going, actually, we kind of like the idea of you guys trying to time how fast you can run through a dungeon, because that's because can you imagine what PV would have been like if they didn't have that?
Yeah, I mean, for mine, it participation in Mythic Plus like completely outclips Arena for sure. I believe
Of
it is
course.
the most popular game mode in WoW among sort of quote unquote competitive players.
Yeah, and anyone that plays retail, most people will play Mythic Plus.
Yeah, because you can't really grind raiding like a raiding raids in the same way that you can grind IO
No.
score arena raiding. So it's kind of the natural, I guess, system. And yeah, it's kind of funny because I believe it was introduced sort of as almost like a little gimmick, like, oh, let's have this little thing that we're gonna have players do, run dungeons fast. Sounds interesting, and then just kind of became the staple game mode. So
Yeah, I think it's turned into something that's kind of keeps the game alive. For example, look at Classic. People raid log. If you're not a PvPer in like Wrath at the minute, you're raid logging. That's basically what I do. I log on every Thursday and Monday to play my Wrath character currently at the minute, because I'm not PvPing on it. I'm not doing anything else. I'm having a great time raiding on Wrath, but I only do that twice a week. I don't, and then I do it for a dedicated like 4 hours, and then I log off again. And that's kind of how that works. Now, if you had like M plus, like they kind of had a concept of M plus in Wrath, with the kind of new gamma dungeons that are harder, like that actually kept them relevant for a longer period of time, and that was really great. And I love that idea. I love that concept. It was an awesome concept, and I really hope they build on it going forwards into the other classic sort of game modes. Because it's sort of like it doesn't need to necessarily become like retail, but it's sort of like we've played it all before, so improve it and kind of make it what it should have been. But I mean, you should look at that, like people raid log unless you're doing PvP, whereas it's the opposite thing on retail, in the fact that like all the PvPers are waiting in queues for solo shuffle, but the kind of Mythic Pluses are kind of going out there and like they're timing keys all the time. They're trying to get people together to do keys. They're getting their mates together to do keys. Like there is a huge amount of engagement in there, and I think the only problem that they've got is by the plateau of how high you can get with keys. I suppose there's only so high you can go before people kind of go, I'm kind of bored now, So I think that's the only thing.
yeah, definitely think. But I definitely think it's an interesting game mode. But we're not here to discuss the MDI anymore. We're here to discuss the real game mode of World of Warcraft, which is PvP, the serious stuff. And the subject of analysis today is the 2024 AWC season. So,
should I play the bumper?
We should play the bumper. We should get into it.
Right.
I'm gonna light you up, sweet cheeks.
Yeah, thanks, bumper. It worked. So let's get into it. Do you want to like introduce to us what the kind of concept you had for this one?
Yeah, I think if you're listening right now, you're getting a preview of an upcoming skill cap video of a 3v3 tier list. So I think we're about to release a 3v3 tier list. I'm just going to guess that we're going to see a lot of these S tier comps and maybe these A plus comps, which we'll get to in a bit, in the tournament. So I think it's important to discuss maybe the 3v3 meta first, and then sort of maybe think about how that might translate to the tournament meta, because usually they're pretty similar. So right now there's a few S tier comps, and I'm sure you've probably seen a few of these on streams. So the first comp is actually basically three comps. It's basically you take a high tier melee, you put it with an elemental shaman and a resto druid, and you have a really good comp. So you can play, for instance, Ellie Shaman Demon Hunter. You can play Ellie Shaman Arms Warrior, which is Thundercleave, or Ellie Shaman Outlaw Rogue. All three of those, I think Waz has been playing a lot of those comps for quite a while now on stream. I'm sure I think I've seen Swapsy play a lot of Thundercleave with the Trillibardum. And so those are, you put an Ellie Shaman with a high tier melee and then the best healer in the game, you usually have a pretty decent comp. And you have, I think, a really good tournament comp because Ellie Shamans can, they have a lot of utility. They can stop a lot. And, you want to play with high tier melee, of course, to end the game for you. And so each one of those comps kind of has its own, unique strengths. Like Demon Hunter is, of course, a constant damage pumper, has a lot of control, has a really big burst window. Arms Warrior, on the other hand, sort of slows the game down a little bit. You're not going to necessarily win off of these big bursty setups. You kind of just win by out attritioning the enemy team. Outlaw Rogue is kind of maybe in between, right? It's sort of like a Demon Hunter plus an Arms Warrior in the same package, right? It can do setups, but it doesn't have the setup potential that Sub Rogue has, and it doesn't really have the pressure that a Assassination Rogue has. Outlaw Rogue's just there to kind of slow the game down and not die, essentially. So that's going to probably be a comp that we see. I mean, Jake, you play an Ellie Shaman. I'm sure you've probably played Thundercleave or LEDH before. And I mean,
I have, yeah.
Seems to be the Ellie Shaman staple, right? You want to play with a high tier melee.
I think I mean, Thunder is an age old comp that has been very, very good for a long time. And I think just the synergy between Ellie Shaman, Resto Druid, Warrior, that sort of immense damage from the Ellie Shaman with the immense damage from an Arms Warrior, plus the Sharpen and the MS effect, and then the Cyclone and the healing output from a Resto Druid. It's kind of almost like they were sort of born to kind of work together. They're kind of like the sort of antithesis of Rogue Mage.
Yeah. It's like they're the immovable object, The Rogue Mage is the unstoppable force, and that's why I kind of wanted to bring an Arms Warrior to a tournament when we're doing the degree pass, because I think that Warrior is just so good at denying things. It's sort of the anti-fun class in WoW. It's like, oh, you want to have fun? No, you're not going to have fun today. I'm going to disarm you, or I'm going to warband, or I'm going to fear. I'm going to stun you. It's like you want to do something. The Warrior's just there. It's just like this obstacle you have to deal with, and as Ellie Shaman's kind of the same way. It's like it gives you a bunch of obstacles you have to deal with in your setups. You have to deal with grounding, you have to deal with shear, you have to deal with hex. You have all these things, or even off healing, for instance, right? All these little things these classes can do to disrupt kills. I mean, kill windows are already pretty small sometimes in WoW, right? You maybe have like 1 second of leeway to actually score a kill, and if something happens in that 1 second, and kill's over. You have to wait 30 seconds or wait a minute, wait 2 minutes, and then you have to do it again. And I think Ellie Shamans and Arms Warriors are just really good at that. And Outlaw Rogues are, good at that too. They're good at denying that too, right? They have a lot of peels and they just don't really die. It's kind of annoying. They run around. Having Demon Hunters, same thing. That's kind of annoying. I mean, they do die a bit more maybe. Just kind of run around, do damage. These attrition-based comps, I think, typically do pretty well in tournaments because people kind of play, I think, a bit more passively in tournaments anyway. And if you could just slow the game down more than the enemy team, and you can get more drinks, you can stop more drinks, I think that's a winning strategy. On the flip side, the next comp that we have is a banger. It's going to be The Walking Dead, Windwalker DK. This is another S tier comp this season. Classic comp, grip stun, has a consistent setup. It's one of those comps that we just kind of discussed earlier, can execution test people. Very difficult to deal with that as a healer when everyone's getting blasted with damage. And currently those two classes, Unholy DK and Windwalker Monk, they can play with a Resto Shaman, which kind of gives them a bit more damage. They can also play with a Preservation Evoker, same thing, a lot of damage. Or they can play with a Resto Druid, less damage, kind of sort of more control, more consistency, kind of pick your flavor. Right. Evoker is an interesting choice. Evoker is kind of like a Resto Shaman. They kind of fit the same role. There's sort of this aggressive healer that can blast with damage. And, Evoker has that AoE Dispel, which works really well in comps that can do AoE setups.
Yeah.
So I
I
like
think
that
this
comp a
could
lot.
be a a sleeper, a sleeper pick with a preservation evoker into the rest of the druid comps, where you grip everything into a blinding sleet, into a leg sweep. In that time period, all the hots have been purged off. You've
Yeah.
got 4 hots come off of 3 different targets. Rest of the druid's got to choose, and it has to make. And you know this as well, playing one, like, it has got to make a split-second decision on who's going to get the healing,
Yep.
or are you going to spread it, or are you going to trank? There's going to be so much that you have to do in response to the fact that a Windwalker can 100 you in 3 seconds,
Yeah.
especially with the DK apocalypse damage and the wounds bursting and everything. And depending on which spec is the DK is playing, there's some extra damage that comes off on top of that. There's a lot going on there, including the healing absorb and the MS effect. So it's deadly. It really could be a very interesting comp to play into, to maybe counter something like, your Thundercleave with a Resto Druid, for example. So there's a lot of scary elements to a Windwalker DK. Walking Dead has been. I mean, I love Walking Dead so much. I think it's an incredibly fun comp. It's not as zug as I think TSG is, or as DHDK is. I feel like having those grip stun setups is really, really good, especially with the way that Fist of Fury works as well, with the way that it massively slows everything. You just get so much damage out, and it just feels like there's that kind of setup base to it, which doesn't make it feel like any other sort of double melee kind of comp, and I really enjoy that.
There's this comp archetype. I've made this comment before, where there's sort of this new type of comp in Dragonflight that I like to call it a blender comp, where it's just like it's a comp that puts everyone together and basically puts them in a blender. It's like there's crazy AoE damage happening, and I think Windwalker DK was the first sort of true blender comp. It pulled everyone together and just like, okay, let's just crush everyone here. And definitely, evokers fit into that blender really well. It's like, okay, we're gonna clump everyone together, we're gonna deep breath on them, everyone's taking damage. Enemy healer has no idea what to do. It's, as you said, like, hots are getting purged. I mean, it's the worst thing in the world. That situation described is at the nightmare situation for a Resto Druid, especially if you don't have overgrowth. If you don't have overgrowth, you get gripped in and everyone just gets their hots purged. Oh my gosh, you just instantly lose in that moment. But another potential blender comp is the one we're about to talk about, which is DHDK, which is another S tier comp that we're probably going to see in the tournament. I've seen this a lot on streams. I think MVQ just plays this comp every single time I watch a stream. Lots of damage. You can play with a Holy Paladin, Resto Shaman, and Resto Druid. I'm sure you could play with a Preservation Evoker as well. But yeah, that's a pretty nasty comp too. I believe Sea-Doo plays it as well. And yeah, I mean, same concept,
not just
right?
Sea-Doo, not just Sea-Doo. I've also played this comp.
Oh, nice.
I have also played this comp. It's a really interesting one, Big. I actually have to say, I think I see this one being played a little bit more than maybe the Windwalker DK, as much as it saddens me to say. I think DH has. I think there's some builds out there for DH. I don't think they've been tapped up yet. I don't think anyone's kind of shared it yet. But I think there's some builds out there on the DH where you just pump the most redonkulous damage consistently all the time. And I think what we're gonna find is it's gonna be treated kind of like a Windwalker DK. You're gonna grip that healer in, and everyone's gonna get stunned with that AoE Chaos Nova into I-Beam, into all the kind of damage that comes out from the DH and the DK. The only thing I'd say that kind of makes it a little bit grim is the fact that you don't quite have the same sort of spread of slows. So yeah, you've got Chains of Ice and you can AoE Chains of Ice, but you don't have like the Fist of Fury.
Yeah.
Or the way that the Windwalker connects, or the kind of hamstring, kind of like a lot of the slows can be dispelled. And I think that's the only thing that would kind of, I think, where it would really struggle into something like an RMD. Kind of like we're gonna be talking about that as well, but any into Rogue Mage, I feel like they'd really struggle. I think DHs die very easily in stuns. I think maybe Windwalkers actually have a slight advantage on that they have a few more defensives nowadays. So
yeah, Windwalkers, I think they both can die in stuns. Yeah, they kind of suffer. Yeah, they'll definitely both suffer in stuns. I think the advantage of DKDH So if you play a caster into that, you're the only caster on the enemy team. Like you're gonna get absolutely harassed with kicks the entire game, especially if they're playing with the rest of shaman. And that's a miserable time. I wouldn't want to be a warlock, for instance, into that comp.
Oh
No
no, for
way,
sure.
no
For
way.
sure.
Or like a poor shadow priest, rest in peace, shadow. But imagine being like a shadow priest or affliction warlock in the DKDH.
No,
even
they die.
Yeah, even if you get your dots out, right? There's AMS, and demon hunters take less magic damage passively. There's reverse. There's all these just like random things. Oh my gosh, what a miserable time. Anyway,
If you're playing sorry, very quickly, if you're playing a DH and you're queuing into an affliction warlock, don't play cleanse by flame. I can tell you, you will die. You will die all the time.
Yeah.
You will die. My teammate played that one time, and it was the funniest thing. Every single time he went to put immolation aura, he just kind of lost 90, like almost like 80% of his HP. It was the funniest thing. Obviously, we lost that game, but I thought it was amusing either way.
Yeah, don't do that. The final S tier comp, you kind of you alluded to it just a second ago, is Rogue Mage Resto Druid, and it's Arcane Mage, Outlaw, or Sub Rogue, and a Resto Druid. So RMD, kind of a classic tournament comp. It's either RMD or RMP. Right now, Druids are the best healers, so Rogue Mage Druid seems to be the logical choice. Arcane it's kind of I don't know how I feel about Arcane. I know why people at the high end play it, because you have a lot of mobility. I mean, geez, nothing is more annoying than trying to chase around an arcane mage. They're just running and zipping around the map, blinking all over the place. It's really aggravating to deal with. And then they have sort of this big burst window where they do a lot of damage, and it's kind of annoying. So, but I still am a Frost fanboy, and rest in peace, Fire. I think Fire is really fun to play. It just kind of sucks right now. Outlaw is kind of, again, the more dampening rogue spec. It's kind of like Arcane Mage. It's just the Arcane Mage of rogues. It runs around, is kind of fast, doesn't really do much, but it just kind of annoys you. It's gonna, tickle you with damage sometimes, and other times it's gonna blast you with damage. It's kind of, a bit unpredictable like that. And then Sub Rogue, of course, is, Sub Rogue. It has a lot of control. It's very hard to kill. It's very lethal, right? It's a classic execution test rogue spec. You have to deal with Shadowy Duel, which I have a hunch is going to be nerfed at some point. If this
It needs to be. Oh my god!
I think that's the one thing that they need to, without getting too into it. I mean, we discussed this for a little bit. Shadowy Duel, I think, is the way you nerf Sub Rogue. Like, I think that at the high end, it's the most punishing ability to deal with. Low end, I don't care. Like, I'm sure low, because we discussed, the problem is like Sub Rogue doesn't really do well, lower ratings, but I don't think players are using Shadowy Duel efficiently at lower ratings anyway. So it's like, okay, we just get rid of it. But yeah, Sub Rogue, of course, gonna be good with a mage and a healer, any healer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think I am actually really happy with the balancing across the board.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing really that needs a kind of nerf is Sub Rogue's control, or just Rogue's control in general. I think it can be quite oppressive. And I think that's kind of why we see a lot of outlaw rogue and a lot of rogues in the sort of upper tiers of the of like a tier list, because of the fact that they enable everyone else so unbelievably well, because they've not only got the damage, they've got all the defensives and all of the control. Yeah. So when you give a class everything, like they're obviously going to work with everything. That's why they've always worked with everything, because they've got high damage, high control, high survivability, and and I think that kind of makes them the god tier. But I'm really interested to see what you think. Obviously, we've got all of these S tier comps. That's Ellie plus Melee plus Rest of Druid. We've got the Windwalker, DK, Walking Dead, DK, DH, and RMD. What do you think is going to come on top, and who do you think is going to be utilizing them the most effectively?
Well, if I, I don't make bets, but if I were to bet on what team is going to do well this AWC, it's, on EU, it's definitely going to be Echo, right? And you can always reliably count on them to do well. I could definitely see them playing a lot of RMD in this tournament. If they're not playing something like Thundercleave or whatever, because I think that RMD pick is going to do really well into the Demon Hunter DK and the Windwalker DK, if that's, those are two comps that are picked. Because as we mentioned, I mean, you can blast the monk quite easily, especially if you're playing sub rogue. So yeah, I don't know, between all of these comps, I don't know which one is best. I think RMD is probably the comp that has the highest potential in tournaments, but who knows? I mean, there's always seems to be an answer to RMD or Rogue Mage in every tournament. Usually historically it's been Jungle Cleave. But I don't think jungle is that good right now. Ferals are definitely struggling. So I don't know what the natural enemy right now of Rogue Mage is. If there even is one. But yeah,
it's another Rogue Mage.
Yeah, of course. The counter to Rogue is Rogue.
The counter to Rogue is Rogue.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. You know what? I think I personally think that I do think RMD is going to be the top one. I think we'll see Echo taking it through. However, I would love to see like a Thundercleave come out and just, be incredibly strong, or something else kind of shock us. I think we may be in for a surprise this AWC. I think we're gonna experience some things that are gonna be unusual, and I would love to see that. I would love for a non-rogue mage comp to find success in an AWC, at least kind of recently. It feels like they just sort of like, oh, rogue's been nerfed, or kind of, mage isn't that great, but actually, to be honest with you, together it doesn't really matter because they both complement each other so well. I think I'll kind of go out on a limb and say that I think rogue mage are the perfect combination, the ultimate symbiosis. They're the kind of Goku Vegeta of WoW PvP.
Yeah, I think one potential comp that can do well into Rogue Mage is I think Boomy Rogue can. I think that's a good matchup for Boomy. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, please. Like, I could be completely wrong, but Boomy Rogue is just one of those things that, I mean, it has a rogue, so it can beat the other rogues, and Boomy damage is still really good. Obviously, I mean, it's a very threatening class to deal with and can slow the game down a lot. So maybe Boomy Rogue is a potential answer to Rogue Mage. I don't know. I don't know who wins that matchup. Please don't hate me if I'm wrong on that. But anyway, now though, I think the A tier, the A plus tier is a bit more interesting.
Yeah.
So
I'm intrigued to see why you've chosen, why these have been picked, because I admittedly I feel like the S tier is very obvious, of course. Having played the season, but the A plus isn't, and I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on this. But anyway, why didn't you introduce some of them?
Let me move this one down because I want to talk about this one last. So the first comp that is on the A plus tier, which I don't think should come as a surprise to many people, is Boomy DH. Boomy DH historically is just a really good comp, has some pretty deadly setups, right? It can kind of do everything. It's sort of like a different flavor of Rogue Mage almost. I mean, it's kind of like an off-brand Rogue Mage. Can do goes, has a lot of CC, can slow the game down, is very threatening with damage. It can execution test you. Of course, you can play it with a Resto Shaman, which is kind of historically what's common. But because Resto Druids are so strong right now, you can obviously play with a Resto Druid or even a Preservation Evoker if you want that sort of extra pressure that we were talking about earlier. So that's one comp again, where you can kind of choose your route, right? Do you want to take the pressure route by choosing a Resto Shaman or Preservation Evoker, or do you want to have the kind of more consistent route by taking the Resto Druid? It might seem kind of weird to have two Druids on the same team, but I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's totally fine. I mean, Resto Druid can just at that point focus mostly on healing. But yeah, I think Boomy DH is definitely something we could see in the tournament. And I saw, just looking at some of the rosters, I mean, Team Liquid can play Boomy DH because Trill plays Demon Hunter and Samiam plays Boomkin. So that's a potential team that can play it. I also saw that Dippy signed up, and he's playing with Existence, I believe is an EU player who plays DH as their main. So we have a few different people in the tournament who can play Boomy DH, and it's a really common ladder comp. And yeah, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that comp, Jake?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Boomy DH. I played it a lot in Shadowlands, and I think what's really interesting about Boomy DH, and I personally think it's really good with a Resto Shaman. I think that'd be a really good matchup into Rogue Mage because of the fact that you've got a lot to stop goes on. However, I think even better into that will be, as you mentioned, that kind of Resto Druid, Balanced Druid, DH, because of the fact that you can't poly 2 out of 3 of the targets. And with the way that, obviously Cyclones are go on DR, but if you got both of them kind of casting Cyclone, 2 kicks have to be committed, and you can only stop really one of them. So I feel like the amount of CC you're able to kind of coordinate with your team, especially with the Root Beam, it can be really good. Also, swapping onto Resto Druids, who are, fairly vulnerable when they're out and about. I feel like DH Boomy's got the ability to do so with a well-timed beam and stun, and vortex with the Resto Druid,
Yeah,
gripping them back in.
yeah, you can do a lot of cheesy stuff with Beam. Like it's definitely it's people tend to think that Beam is like only good for like root beaming healers, and of course that's what it's mostly used for. But I mean, geez, you can just layer it on top of a stun, and it's just really annoying to deal with. Or even beam someone's trinket, like you just stun them, they
Yeah.
trinket into a beam. I mean, that's really annoying. So yeah, I think it's definitely a comp that we'll probably see. Um,
Well, it's interesting as well because I used to play again in Shadowlands Frost DK Balanced Druid, and I was playing Frost DK, and we had a really interesting go. Now, obviously, bear in mind this was when Frost DK had just only a 1 minute go, kind of similar to what they've got now, but they did, I mean, literally nothing outside of the go. Like they did nothing. You hit like a wet noodle outside of the go, but in the go you hit so unbelievably hard that what would happen is we'd grip the healer in on top of the DPS, kind of blinding sleet everyone, and then with the Frostworm's Fury going out, kind of stunning everyone, and then obviously you kind of Remorse's Winter, we would then kind of root beam on top, and you'd be blasting into the healer, who then kind of runs out and either trinkets a stun straight into a strangulate silence, or kind of just dies in the beam. And it happened all the time, and it was hilarious. And obviously this only worked up to a certain rating, but it was, we really blasted it. It was actually a lot of fun to do so. And I think that's kind of interesting way. So I imagine that there's going to be a lot of opportunities going into the next kind of cup where a DH Boomkin team will be able to kind of swap onto healers and kill instead of just using it as a means of CC.
yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely like can catch you off guard as well. And I think again in tournaments, if you can catch people off guard, that's really good. Um, speaking of being caught off guard, I think when we were talking about this before the show notes, the next 2 comps that are on the A+ tier are fairly interesting. Well, one of them isn't as interesting. It's Destro Warlock with a Rogue, and then either a Resto Druid or Holy Paladin. So any Rogue spec, throw it with a Destro Warlock and throw it with a Resto Druid or Holy Paladin. I'm guessing the Holy Paladin probably is playing more with the Asa Rogue than anything else, but I don't know. Rogue Lock. I mean, that's a comp that we sometimes see from time to time. I mean, I think Rogue Mage typically takes up that space. It's kind of occupies that same little zone of comps. But I love Rogue Lock. It's one of my favorite comps to play. And there's a lot of teams, especially on NA, that have the potential to play that. I know, for instance, Thugonomics is playing with Aiden and Chaz, I believe, as the healer. And I think, let's see, there's another team that has, I mean, a lot of teams have Rogue Lock. Calvish's team has Rogue Lock. I don't know what they're named. I believe also so Calvish is playing for Void now, and they picked up that team. I don't know if the move would play Rogue Lock at all, but that's definitely, I mean, WizK has played Warlock in the past, and Shadow Priest is not good right now. So I'm guessing that there's a potential option for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rogue Lock, I would love to see that team or that comp do well
I
this
think we'll see
season.
Echo will definitely give it a go if they don't win with the RMD. I think we'll
Yeah,
see. their roguelike come out.
Yeah, Waz and Chanimal have been playing it a lot on stream, so I mean, there's definitely a good reason for that. If basically, if you want to know what's going to be good in tournaments, by the way, all you have to do is just open up Waz's stream before the AWC, see whatever he's playing, and that's going to be a good comp. That's probably what you're going to see in the tournament.
Yeah.
There's also another variation of roguelike that is supposedly A plus tier, which is Affliction Warlock, Assassination Rogue, Holy Paladin. Now that is a flavorful comp. I mean, that is, geez, when's the last time we've seen an Affliction Warlock do well in a tournament? I believe it was like Shadowlands, maybe season 1. I think there was
One
some
shot.
people, yeah, there's some people playing Shadow Play, but we typically don't see Affliction Warlock as a rogue. I mean, that is a throw. That is like something that is straight out of like 2010 or something. I mean, what are your thoughts on that comp?
I mean, this is the thing. I think it's secretly OP. I think as a rogue, Affliction Warlock just rot everyone to death. The way that Garrote kind of procs, especially when it's like a super Garrote, like a Garrote coming out of stealth, ticks for like 45k per tick, which is nuts. That is heavy. And if you're multi-dotting up some of these double melees whilst the Affliction Warlock has got all the damage out, if the Affliction Warlock fakes a kick, they're done for. Absolutely. If any precog gifters kind of come out there and give it to the Affliction Warlock, there's a lot of damage that can kind of go out. And there seems to be a lot just in general. You kind of get agony and corruption out, and everything's been buffed, and you get like an unstable affliction, and then your damage just kind of seems to kind of skyrocket. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that, especially if they can kind of damp people a little bit, even getting into 10 or like 15% dampening. I think we'll see that the Affliction Warlock team with an Assassination Rogue, with I can't remember what the name. It used to be Toxic Blade, but it's something else now where you kind of get the super wound poison. I think there's going to be a lot of
hemotoxin.
Yeah, that's what it's called now. The hemotoxin kind of go. I think there's going to be a lot of that where it's just going to be totally unstoppable. I think very underrated. Now, do I think it will be played? I don't know. I'm not sure. I think there'll be a team that has this up their sleeve as a potential. It'll be something that maybe gets pulled out. Let's say Echo are doing really badly and they need the kind of support of something that's a little bit more kind of weird and strange. And I think this is something that we might see there. I'm not sure anyone will kind of go in and say this is their main comp, but I would love to be surprised for once. I really would. I would love to see more comp variation. I honestly, if a team locks this in, I'll be like, wow, they've got cojones. These guys have got some real balls to kind of go in there and just kind of get in there and do all that stuff. I think it's a really interesting comp.
Yeah, it's kind of like the off meta of all three of those roles. And I mean, it's Affliction Warlock, which is probably the least meta in tournaments, at least for the Warlock specs. Same with Assassination Rogue, least meta typically. And then Holy Paladin, which sometimes meta, sometimes not really. I mean, right now Holy Paladin's in a good state, so kind of makes sense. But yeah, it's definitely a comp that I can see like people, like even experienced people losing to. Like if you had a group of players who one tricked that and only played that, I could see them like doing like really well in a tournament.
Yeah,
they might run into some like if they get it, if you play that comp and you have like a good good placement on the bracket, you have a good bracket seating. I mean, you could do really well. I think that's kind of. I think what tends to happen is unless you're like one of these teams like Echo or Kearney's team or Calvish's team, you're kind of, and you if you have one trick, you're kind of at the whim of wherever you get placed on the bracket, because if you run into your counter, it's like, okay, that's game over. But yeah, anyway, the final comp on the A+ tier, which I think is a bit interesting, is a Turbo Cleave. So that's Enhancement Shaman, of course, with an Arms Warrior, and either a Fist Weaver or a Holy Paladin. This is the first time we've seen Fist Weaver on this list so far. I mean, Turbo, that team did really well. I think it was last season. It was Saul's team. Oh, but he was playing Windwalker Enhance. Anyways, never mind. There wasn't a Turbo Cleave last season, but Turbo's interesting. I mean, it's kind of the same concept as Thunder Cleave, right? It's just a different variation of Thundercleave to some degree. Kind of a tanky, utility heavy melee cleave, very disruptive. I mean, what are your thoughts on this pick, Jake, as a shaman main yourself?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Saul's team. I honestly think the Windwalker Turbo kind of works in a similar way. High damage, utility, comp with enhanced shaman, which does a lot of burst damage, a lot of self heals, and then just a lot of micro CC. In fact, it's crazy how much they have. Obviously, you got the range kick, you got the grounding, you've got tremor, you've got earthquake, you've got cap totem, you've got static field totem, you've got the roots, you've got everything that an Ellie has, with the unfortunate aspect of having to be in melee range. However, what you do have over Ellie is quite literally the most insane burst possible that just retains this insane burst for a very long period of time. However, slightly more scripted, I'll say. Ellie burst can kind of be a bit out of nowhere, and I think enhancement sort of has this kind of bit more script to it, so you can kind of work with it. I think the turbo will be an interesting one. I don't think it'll outblender the Windwalker DK or the DH DK. I think if it was a match between the two of them, I think the turbo would sadly lose just for the sake of the fact that the enhancement shaman or the warrior probably would go down first. I think they can both be squishy sometimes, and being forced into defensive stance is not always what you want to do. I will say that with Burrow being added, that giving a sort of pseudo immunity to shamans in general is a possible kind of way out of that. But I really like Turbo. I think Turbo is an interesting comp, but it is kind of your classic Zug. It is the kind of one where you just run at the target. You do as much, your damage is just unstoppable, and you just run them down, and you run down healers, you run down priests, you run down anything that kind of just cannot escape from you. And that's kind of the going to go to. I don't know whether or not it will be able to beat something like RMD, but I think, again, much kind of like the Asa Aphly lock, I'm intrigued to see it kind of come into and be played. I don't know whether or not I can think of any team that would probably play it, but I would love to be surprised again. I would love to see it happen. I just feel like there are some other comps that are just insanely good, and yeah, I just don't think it would be picked over something like RMD or DHDK, for example. I don't know if any of that made sense.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. My bad.
I thought that might be the case.
Yeah.
That's why I did that sneaky little interlude.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I definitely think, especially if you have Thundercleave as an option, Thunder. I mean, to quote Swapsy, because it's kind of different. It's kind of funny because Ellie shamans and enhancement shamans just kind of share a lot of their toolkit. And usually Ellie's better, and the reason for that is, well, it's kind of easy to understand. Ellie is running away from the enemy team the whole time, and Enhance is running towards it. So you can kind of see like one is going to take more damage than the other typically. Usually they're both going to be the target. It's just one is better at avoiding damage. Next thing I want to do is, before we wrap things up, is kind of preview some of the teams that are going to be playing on both regions. So I'll start with NA because it is the superior region.
Oh, okay.
Not biased. All jokes aside. So I'm just going to go through this kind of randomly. I'm not picking one of these over the other, but the first team I want to talk about is Unitas. It's going to be Aiden, who mains Rogue, Abrua, who mains Mage, Chaz as the healer, and then Thugonomics as a Warlock option for that team. So that would be my roster. We were talking in the preview to the show. What sort of classes we'd want to have on our team, and that's Rogue, Mage, and Lock for me as a Resto Druid. And so that's what Unitas is playing. Hope they do well. Team Liquid is, them. Hopefully, it's going to be Sea-Doo, Mez, Samam, and Trill. A lot of comp options from those people. I think those people typically lab the hardest when it comes to tournaments. They kind of do a lot of experimentation. They sort of pick whatever is going to be the most consistent typically. They focus a lot on consistent cooldown trades. you know how Sidu is. He likes to, that team likes to really script things. Always seems to do well in tournaments, so probably they're going to do well this time around, especially since they have access to a lot of those S tier comps. Another team that I think could be a dark horse in this tournament, as I mentioned earlier, is Dippy's team. It's Dippy playing with KZ Fox, Existence, who's a EU guy who plays a lot of melee, and then Zhang is the healer who plays a lot of healers. So that's a comp that has a caster with a lot of melee potential and a healer who can multi-class. That's probably going to be good for a tournament. Power Frogs. This is an interesting lineup of players. It's going to be Tuna, who I'm guessing is playing Resto Druid. Chun Li, who plays a lot of things these days, can play Hunter, actually. Can play Windwalker Monk, can play Devastation Evoker. Just does a lot of weird stuff. Dazed, who typically mains Rogue. And then Cubsy is actually on this team. So Cubsy is once again found himself on a roster with another Resto Druid, so we can only assume that Cubsy is going to probably play Mage. So this team has RMD up their sleeve. Void GG, this is a team that I think could easily win on NA. This is Calvish's team. So it's Calvish, Kearney, Nick the Rogue, and Wealthy Man. So the Wealthy Man moved, was playing with Cubsy before. Now that team is kind of split apart. Wealthy Man's actually now playing with Calvish, Kearney, and Nick, which is pretty crazy. I mean, those are sort of like the three young guns, Calvish, Kearney, and Nick. And Wealthy Man kind of used to be the young gun player in tournaments. Now he's kind of a boomer like the rest of us. But yeah, I could definitely see that team doing really well. They have a lot of heavy hitters. And, Calvish, I'm sure by now, is winning a lot of tournaments on the solo shuffle side. Kind of this unstoppable rogue. Then we have the move, and it looks like Peekaboo hasn't even signed up yet. But it's Absurd, WizK, and then presumably Peekaboo and Jelly Beans. I think. I'd hope they'd be playing together still.
He's too busy getting the dosh, He's too busy grinding out that streamer money, I think, to bother with the old AWC.
Well, hopefully that's okay. I mean, we'll see. Because right now the move only has 2 people on their roster, which is kind of, that's kind of typical move fashion, right? I could see, Peekaboo probably forgot to sign up. He probably went to go get Taco Bell or something. Came back and he
yeah. I would also forget to sign up to getting Taco Bell,
and then
because I have to go abroad to get it.
Yeah, and then okay, so that's NA. Those are, I think, the heavy hitters on NA. I'm sure I missed a team or two. I'm terribly sorry, and I don't hate you. I was going through the list pretty quickly. Then we have EU, which is, depending on who you ask, also the superior region.
Yeah.
And so the first team previewing here is Team My Way, which, at the core is Tony and Kasu. And it looks like they have, I don't know this guy too well, Lanat. I believe he plays Priest. I'm sure this guy plays every healer, like many healers do. And then they also have Shadow Death, which I believe is a DK. So they have kind of a lot of weird, it's like they have Hunter DK, they have Feral DK, they have Jungle Cleave. Those aren't, oh my gosh. Hunter DK is a potential count. And think about, Garrissar was typing, what is the rock, paper, scissors? Don't quote me on this, Garrissar. Don't quote me on this stream. I believe Hunter DK does really well into Rogue Mage. I'm putting that out there. Yeah. And it's really annoying for the Mage. You're just getting blasted by damage the whole time. And so in typical fashion, Tony's team is playing has the comp that could potentially beat Waz's team. They're gonna have to get a really good bracket, but that could be one dark horse in this tournament.
We actually see that a lot in EU. Actually, the DK Hunter. I have seen that quite a few times in threes.
Yeah, it's a ladder slaying comp. If you want to get Gladiator, that's a comp I would play. Just throw that in. You're gonna have fast games probably, and you're gonna win a lot of them. The next team I want to talk about, I don't really know too many people on this team, but the team captain is Bank, the Fistweaver Monk, playing with someone named Anime is Real. I don't know who that is. Then playing with Hidden Stock, who I believe mains Hunter, and then playing with a Feral Druid whose name I can't pronounce. I have no idea how to say it, but anyway, we have some hunter, jungle, cleave, fistweavery things going on here. Then of course we have Echo, which is Waz, Raikou, and Chanimal, who have now picked up Lontar. So Meh has retired from playing tournaments, and Lontar has taken his place. I mean, I think this is kind of a logical choice. Lontar plays every healer at a really high level, which is insanely valuable in tournaments. Priest right now isn't the best in the game, so even if they had Meh on their team, that would be a bit awkward. Lontar can play Resto Druid really well. Can also play Resto Shaman, Preservation Evoker extremely well. So yeah, a lot going on for that comp or that team of players. Probably the favorites to win EU. Then we have a team that signed up as the name TR Enthusiast Team. This is Jamie as the captain. So Jamie's playing with Mercy, Tebsy, and Walrick. So they kind of have that sort of warrior, Ellie Shaman, Warlock sort of vibe going on. That seems to be what Jamie tends to like. That sort of archetype of comp. Don't know who Tebsy is, but I'm assuming they play Druid.
That's a good assumption to make.
So yeah. Then we have Sauna Squad, which is Gelubaba, Clyde, Nazarins, and Nixie. So those are all kind of tournament veterans. Played in it, I don't know if these guys have played a lot together, but I'm just kind of assuming they have because they're playing on a tournament together now. Kind of an interesting mix of players there. And then the Fiends. Okay, this is a fan favorite with Bikmex as the team captain, with Zenlin and Rat, the rogue. So they play that Thug Cleave. They seem to one-trick that every tournament, and sometimes they do really well. So, be on the lookout. That's another team that could potentially beat Rogue Mage, right? Is the Thug Cleave. Rogue beats Rogue, right? I mean,
of course, we know what the rock paper scissors is, and it's Rogue is also a counter to Rogue. So I think to be honest with you, anything that's like a setup comp that's got a longer CC chain, like hunters and mages and stuff like that, tends to do well into one another because, quite frankly,
do you know what it is, man?
What is it?
It's the flare. You put the flare down, the rogue can't vanish off the go. That's why Thug Cleave is the rogue mage slayer. It denies one of the key defensives.
Exactly. Oh no, the rogue vanished for the 5th time in a row. That's fine. Flare's down. Oh, all good. We can see him.
Yeah.
Or them.
Oh no, you can't even vanish in flare. You cannot press vanish if you're in flare. By the way, it does not work.
That's why the flare comes down shortly afterwards. You've preempted the vanish, so they go to press vanish. Vanish is used, and the flare is down. That is the quality of the players playing on the AWC. I imagine Big Mex are going to come out and be like, I knew who was going to vanish. I knew Waz was going to vanish, so the big old flare came down straight after, and it's over for Waz.
It's 500 IQ plays.
It is.
Speaking of 500 IQ, the next team is captained by Swapsy. It's Swapsy playing with Brunity and Next. I don't know if they have a 4th yet, but that's Swapsy, who plays a lot of stuff, plays Shaman, plays Warlock, Brunhitty, which pretty much plays any melee, and then Next, who pretty much plays any healer. So they have a really good sort of base to figuring out whatever that 4th player is going to be. And then the last team I want to go over is kind of maybe less known. It's currently captained by Oscar, who plays Mage, and then Acrolol's the Rogue, kind of a tournament veteran. And then I don't know who this is, Azure Bear. I'm just gonna assume they play Druid. They have Bear in their name, and they're playing with a Rogue and a Mage. So that
makes sense.
Safe bets. But yeah, that's a preview of the upcoming AWC season. We of course discussed the meta, and now you have a preview of some of the teams, and a lot of those teams are probably going to be playing these S and A+ tier comps, and I'm really excited. Jake, I mean, who are you going to be cheering for this season?
You know what? That is a very, very good question. That's an incredibly good question. I am going to be cheering for actually my friends. I think I'm really happy that one of my buddies from Argent Dawn, who we've had on the podcast before, Nethy, is going to be playing in the AWC.
Oh yeah.
This year, and I think I'll probably be cheering for them and hoping that they get through. I would really like for them to do so because I think outside of we've actually, to be honest with you, I will say Rathpie is also a Argent Dawn EU member and part of the old club, and but that there's no one else that's actually competed in the AWC. And what's really great about Nethy is that Nethy has kind of come from the kind of your classic sort of gladiator every season, just kind of pushing with friends, to now rank 1 last season and rank 1 in solo shuffle, and probably like the highest rated evoker in Europe, and kind of come out of that kind of almost seemingly nowhere. And really kind of taking a storm, and then with that kind of access, played with other rank 1 players, and now I think is in a team with Cassidy and Sammers. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they do and where they get to. And I obviously would love to see them reach the broadcast. And yeah, that's who I'm going to be supporting. But obviously, if Nethy gets knocked out, then I will probably have to. I'm probably gonna, to be honest with you, I'll probably support Gelu and Clyde because you gotta support the old British gang. Got to keep that EU dream alive. Brexit means Brexit and everything. So, yeah, that's me. Well, what about you, Big?
I'm voting for. Or I'm gonna be cheering for the move. I always want Peekaboo's team to win, assuming Peekaboo is on the team.
Yeah.
they definitely they bring a lot of hype to the scene, and I just like the way they play. Very aggressive players. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just happy to have something to do on the weekends now. Forever alone. But yeah, it's nice to be able to watch the AWC on a Saturday. It's kind of a nice little thing, right? It's like, oh yeah. And
Yeah,
so
legit.
I'm happy just that we get to see some games. Anyway, breaking news 12 minutes ago, class tuning was posted for this upcoming
No
week.
way.
Yeah, a lot of crazy changes. I don't want to. Maybe I should. No, it's going to take too long to get into all this. A lot of changes.
Where did they get posted?
Well, on the forums, I'll just go through the PvP changes. It looks like there are some Unholy DK nerfs, some Boomkin nerfs, Feral buffs, Resto Druid nerfs, Frost Mage something. I think it's a buff. Windwalker nerfs.
Oh my god, the rep
Or
buffs.
wait. Yeah, Windwalker nerfs. Disc Priest buff. Sub Rogue nerf. Resto Shaman nerf. No idea. Warlock, I don't know.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Breaking news, cloth specializations now getting an additional 35% armor in arena. Oh, that's big.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That is huge.
Plate specializations now have their armor reduced by 30%. Well, all fear and root effects in PvP now may take 100% more damage before canceling in combat.
Oh my
Interesting.
god, that's such a huge buff to warlocks. Oh my god, it's a massive buff to warlocks. This. I know we're sort of experiencing this halfway through the podcast. I feel like this is just it needs to even be talked about. I mean, we've been waiting for this situation. We thought nothing was gonna happen. I think I don't know. I mean, there is a slight nerf with the warlocks, but obviously that makes sense because you've already got the kind of fear thing. That kind of means that you don't have to take that talent anymore, which is actually kind of cool. I mean, this is kind of nutty though. Like, what do you think about this? I mean, it's a 15% nerf on unholy damage, 10% on the death car. I honestly don't think it's going to affect them massively, but that's obviously going to affect maybe DK and DK, some of the DK comps from being as strong. Obviously the Druid Moonkin nerf with armor is big. I think personally, with what I'm looking at here, with how some of the PvE changes are kind of going, because again, hunters are being buffed. I think we're gonna see stuff like some of the hunter comp. I think maybe the fiends have got it then now because they've got.
Well, look at the Ret Paladin damage buffs in PvE.
Yeah.
Those are substantial. Those are not
Those are
small numbers. Those are big numbers.
huge.
Let me see what else. Holy Priests got some pretty big buffs. I mean, Zen, we were just talking about the Fiends
Yeah.
playing Thug Cleave. I mean, they got, those are big buffs. Resto Druids. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I feel like we could sit here forever and either cry and whatever. Maybe the best thing for us to do is, guys, if you want to have a look at these notes, they will be in the show notes. We'll put them in there and make sure that they're there. I guess this kind of technically counts as us talking about some sort of WoW PvP news. But before we get onto that, obviously we've had a chat about the AWC. We've talked about what we think is going to be interesting now. Obviously, with the AWC coming up, these changes are going to affect it. So this is going to be very interesting. But let's talk about the one thing you change, as we always do at the end of the subject analysis. What's the kind of, if you had unlimited money, if you had unlimited influence, if you had Bill Gates in your back pocket now, what would you change?
There needs to be some new incentive for players who don't PvP to start PvPing. Right. Throughout in the early stage of Shadowlands, of course, the incentive was the fact that the upgraded weapon was higher item level than any obtainable PvE weapon. So a lot of raiders were doing arena at the start of the expansion, which I thought was pretty interesting. We had a lot of activity Shadowlands Season 1. So any sort of carrot on a stick like that can get people in the door to PvP, even if it's momentarily, I think would be immensely helpful. Also, if you look at participation, or if you look at rating distribution in WoW, it really trickles down after 1800, and so that's a good sign that people probably are only playing arena to get that 1800 reward and then sort of dipping out. So if only there was a reward in between 1800 and 2400, I think that would be really cool. If there could be some extra thing, maybe at around 2100, because I think that's where there's a lot of potential to sort of boost up the rest of the bracket as you get more people in that range. So yeah, more incentives for people to PvP.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to do. I think I think for me it would be maybe rearranging how we are rewarded in PvP. So and then also the amount of dedicated GMs there are to sorting out solo shuffle, because I think solo shuffle is the key really to how we fix PvP, allow people to kind of queue up whenever and not have all the massive queues and be able to find find games quicker, that kind of stuff, incentives for healers, that kind of thing, get it really worked out, but also have that dedicated support, so there are people constantly kind of working on ways to do that, kind of get a whole team for like dealing with solo stuff, because the possibilities are really endless, I think. And I think it's just a shame that there's not as much support on that end. But yeah, okay.
Sorry, I was muted again. My bad.
Okay, go ahead.
And now I'm frantically scrambling to figure out what to do with all these tier lists that are supposed to be released. We'll see.
Well, should we, whilst you're thinking about how you're going to do that, should we just do some of the WoW PvP news that we've got coming up? Obviously, the big news has just dropped, but let's talk about the WoW PvP news. And yeah, I'm going to play the bumper.
All right. Who ordered up an extra large can of whoop ass?
Alrighty. So obviously there were some hot fixes before, which is apparently the big ones on the ones that came out from January the 18th is there was an issue where frigid petals were not being cancelled when entering a battleground. I don't know what that is. I'm fairly sure that's some sort of buff that you could get, which kind of made you super strong, probably in battlegrounds. And then also they fixed an issue where attaining bloody tokens in Zaralek Caverns and Emerald Dream were not contributing to the Bloodstained Bounty, Blood Bank, or the Prosper. Oh my god, I can't even say it. This was some of the achievements basically. So they fixed that. So that was originally going to be all the hot fixes that kind of mattered for PvP. Obviously, that we now have some bigger hot fixes that have just dropped. So obviously, if you want to check those out, they will be in the show notes. But obviously, you can find them on Wowhead. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we've got 10.2.5 dropping, so a lot of the new Seeds of Renewal stuff that has kind of gone live. That's a lot of updates to visual things from Shadowlands, like for example, Phaline Stomp and Soul Rot and stuff like that. They are now also on the specific spell schools for the specific specs and classes that they are on. For example, Soul Rot is now a shadow ability. So yeah, kind of a nerf to Affliction Warlocks, kind of giving them less spell schools to be able to cast on. For me personally, now obviously I'm not an Affliction Warlock main. However, I do feel as if this was the right move to do, because there were too many classes that already have a lot of spells. Like maybe obviously Affliction Warlock doesn't, but there's a lot of classes and specs that have a lot of spell schools they can already dip into. Mm-hmm. And I think with the way that the game works, classes should have a bit more of that homogenization in terms of the spell schools, so that you can't just sort of like eat one kick and just cast on another, like that it means nothing. I think that was probably one of the problems that kind of Warlock had in general. However, I think for Demonology and for Destruction, obviously if you get kicked on the right thing, then you're kind of locked out in total, and that's kind of the drawback of it all. But I think kind of having that kind of homogenization is a better for the game, at least better for PvP, kind of less obnoxious for melee players and other people like that. But yeah, that's some of the ideas, some of the things that came out. I know that there's quite a few other ones, but at least for PvP, that's the kind of important ones. Obviously, another big one is the voting that happened for the Season 4 tier sets. I personally think this was stupid. I think they should have just gone, you know what, we'll see you. I mean, nothing wrong with the votes per se, but they should kind of come out and be like, actually, we're going to give you all three options and you can kind of choose. That would be the best thing they could do, because that would give people the ability to kind of pick and choose on how they want to build. I think for PvP, it's very interesting, because it means that everyone will be able to pick stuff and then kind of go, actually, you know what, kind of into this comp, I want to wear this tier set, or into this comp, I want to wear this tier set. There's going to be a lot more min-maxing, which I think is going to be epic. And that would really kind of help people sort of start to get really interested in PvP again, especially when, you know, in times where the participation is low. So yeah, I think it's a shame that they're kind of restricting us. They should just give us everyone, and people should be able to choose what works best. Another major point coming up in the next reset is the conquest uncapping and the Spores of War returning. So aka where you get more conquest and you get more honor for doing stuff like arena and battlegrounds. So this is great, fantastic. You can get your ults up now. You can finally kind of just get everything ready to go. I do think that it's good that we have like a lock on it. Like it isn't like fully always open, which because I don't know about you, Big, if you feel the same way on this one, but I feel like when they release a cap from it like way too early, people just sort of like no life it, and then suddenly you go from being on the same kind of level playing field to suddenly having way less gear than people, so it's almost impossible to even play the game.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they did that in Shadowlands Season 4, where there was uncapped conquest, I believe, from the first week. And that was not fun as someone who didn't really play the game much, because people no-lifed, grinded out all the conquest gear in one day, and then bam, you're suddenly facing people with much better gear. And so, yeah, I think doing it so historically they do it at either the 9-week or 10-week mark, which I think is about right, because at this point in the season, everyone on their main should now have full gear, depending on how lucky you are with your vault. I mean, you probably can get full gear maybe even earlier than this week, but you know, right now is where most people should have full gear, so it kind of makes sense. Plus, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can transfer conquest now. If you play healer, you have the conquest boxes or whatever that you can send to your alts. So yeah, I think I'm excited for them to uncap conquest.
Yeah, nice. I think it'd be great. It'd be very good. I think now's a good time for it. So yeah, obviously there are some hot fixes for Season of Discovery and Ashen Vale. If you want to check those out, please do go have a look. I don't necessarily know what exactly it is that's kind of been changed. Let's have a look. The Battle of Ashenvale now has a minimum and maximum times between battles. It will now never restart sooner than about 2 hours after its last start, and it will not take longer than about 3 hours since its last start. If player activity is very low or very high, the percentage of progress will be sped up or slowed down to match those time constraints. So yeah, I think, and then also some of the quests will now reward 1k reputation, not 200. So some quality of life fixes for the Season of Discovery people, and I think actually in general the conversation on Season of Discovery has been fantastic. I don't know if you've seen the kind of lead devs kind of chat with people on Twitter. I think this is what we could have used with PvP. So, but nobody does that, so that's kind of sucky. But yeah, I think they've got a really fun and great level of communication there. Obviously, we've got our incoming class tuning for the 23rd of January, which is coming up in a few days. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff coming up. It's kind of crazy. This is going to really affect the AWC, and obviously it's going to mostly affect the skill capped 3v3 tier list that's coming out.
Yeah, that sucks. But whatever.
All that hard work for nothing, huh?
Yeah, I mean, tier lists are frustrating. This has been a common theme all expansion. Is like, okay, let's release a tier list. We have one planned. It's going to come out next Monday, and then Friday at what is it, 5 p.m. or it's super late for you. We get these patch notes just out of the blue, and like we're like, okay, they just released a patch. Like if they had no tuning in the patch, we have a little buffer, but apparently not. So
I mean the biggest problem with this is that for us on EU, it's like if you're going by the kind of like central European time, it's like 1:45 in the morning right now. And that's when like people like kind of, I mean, obviously for a lot of WoW players, you're still up and stuff, but people are kind of like going to log into that and find out the next morning that they've been totally shafted. And especially for some of the AWC guys to find out, actually, you know what, we're not going to do so hot. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's just a shame that there was no rogue nerfs at all, actually. Oh well, I guess eviscerate is kind of reduced, but they this is the problem. They nerfed stuff that just didn't need to be nerfed. We already talked about it. It's the length of, and the problem with like stuff like duel and stuff like that. That's the issue, the control and stuff like that. But anyways, it's good to see that they're doing something, but it's just a shame that it's so close to the AWC.
Yeah. Well, at least it gives the teams a little bit of time to adjust, because the armor buff that cloth specs are getting, so cloth specializations now get 35% armor. I mean,
additional armor,
that's I mean, this is music to your ears. I mean, that's a warlock buff right there.
It is. It's not just a warlock buff, it's a mage buff too. And actually what's even more terrifying is that it's such a huge DK nerf, because plate specializations also have their armor reduced by 30%, and DK's already suffered heavily into melee. I genuinely think that DKs are coming out the worst from this. They've been absolutely torn apart by this, by what's going on here. And I think that's kind of terrifying. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the AWC now.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially as you got Resto Druid nerfs too as well.
Yeah, they're not. Those are fake nerfs.
fake nerfs indeed. Alrighty, cool. So very quickly then, before we kind of close this out, do you have any shout outs?
Yeah, shout out to this guy on Reddit who made this post about healing and damage coefficients to MMR and PvP. I believe it's the pinned post right now on the World of PvP subreddit. This guy basically just analyzed a bunch of logs and essentially went through arena data to figure out what spells actually matter in PvP and put it all up in these nice little charts. So go to the World of PvP subreddit and look at that thread. It's really interesting. And so shout out to that guy for making that.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I'm going to shout out all first-time competitors for the AWC. If you guys have signed up for the first time and you found a team, or you're just kind of up and coming in the scene, I think that's really cool. I think I thank you for continuing to play this game, for continuing to try and compete at a very high level. It's wonderful to see. I'm really sort of very happy that people still are. And I think, what kind of makes me happy is seeing people like kind of Calvish and, the kind of the youngins, and like Meep as well, kind of coming up, and, they're so young and they're playing this game. It's kind of like, their dads were playing this game when they were kind of much younger, almost similar age. And I think that's kind of really cool. That's kind of how it goes, that kind of cyclical nature of, I play this when it was, vanilla and TBC, and now you're playing it when it's Dragonflight and the War Within and the kind of the new series of expansions. And I think that's really cool, and I love that we kind of have more talent. I'm hoping that in 5 and 10 more years, when we're sort of at that kind of like 30th anniversary for WoW, that we're still going to be playing, and there's still going to be new people coming in and playing the game.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
So then, this is your part.
Yeah, sorry. Big, could you list off where our listeners can reach us?
Oh, I was hoping you were going to ask me that question. Yeah, you can contact us directly with a tweet to @technically_PvP or by an email to technicallypvp@gmail.com. You can also join our discussions on the Bonus Roll Productions Discord.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, one more thing. Yeah, I am. Also, you can visit the Bonus Rolls website to find the podcast directory with us and many other great shows at bonusroll.gg. This directory also has a review system, so head over there and give us the highest review possible and tell us we're amazing.
Yes, please do all of those things. And of course, as always, the links for all of these will be in the show notes. Thank you all for listening, and we'll chat with you next time. Good night, everyone.
Cheers, guys.